Hey everyone, do you ever have those days where you feel like you're trapped as a autism caretaker or parent? Because that was last Saturday. Normally, and we get a lot of comments and we thank you for them. We get people who say things like, you're wonderful parents, you're a great dad, or you're a great mother. We appreciate what you do for the autism community, and we really try our best to help those with autism shed a good light on autism. But there are some days, as many of you can relate, where we've kind of had enough when it comes to autism and interactions with society. It's one thing to be at home alone with your kids and have like a safe environment where they can just be themselves, but every once in a while we're reminded of what autism can be like in social settings. And one of these was my wife's grandfather's funeral. We took our kids there. We didn't have any babysitters available. All of my family, except for my dad, is out of state, and my dad has had seizures in the past, so he's not really reliable long term when it comes to babysitting.
Basically, we had no choice.
Yeah, her entire family was at the funeral.
And it's a big family. Like, my grandpa...
Yeah, you want to show them?
Yeah, this is... So, my
Hopefully
grandpa
you can see that.
passed away at 93. I mean, he lived a good long life. And, he was a great man. And so many people came. Like, I want to say over 200 at least to the funeral, and more on Zoom. And,
Here.
And so, including spouses, he had 9 children and 45 grandchildren and 49 great-grandchildren. And, I mean, think of that, and that's kind of the numbers we're talking about.
Yeah, there was a lot of people there. Yeah. And I think that's why we had such a problem too, is because while our family, most of her family knows about our kids' situation, there was a lot of like distant relatives and friends who were there who really didn't understand why our kids were doing the things that they were doing.
Well, maybe we should explain what they were doing.
Yeah. So basically, Brittany was really kind of beside herself. She was having a hard time. I mean, it's her grandfather who had passed away. He's a really good man, a Navy veteran. They had naval officers there in uniform. They were playing taps. It was really respectful, very beautiful.
21 gun salute, and I was totally fine not crying until they played taps and my mom sang, and then it was all over,
And we don't have any B-roll. Brittany brought her camera thinking she was going to record some of the event, but
she told me not to, and I was already kind of...
Yeah, she was crying and everything. So if you're wondering why we don't have that much footage of the funeral, I think you might have a photo that your dad took.
We have a photo of the Navy officers giving the flag, folding up the flag, and
we'll get to it. So Alistair really was the first one who acted up. He started crawling underneath the seats.
This is an outdoor memorial at the graveside.
Yeah, it had to be outdoor because there were so many people, and the whole pandemic thing. And speaking of which, he loves babies, which is really cute. He's actually really compassionate when it comes to babies. And he was like, oh, cute baby. So he kept going to all these babies up close and personal in the audience. And that would be cute
if it wasn't like the eulogy.
Right, yeah. So it was the middle of the eulogy, and he's like, oh, cute baby, oh, cute baby. So he was just being distracting, and he was getting right in their faces. And I could tell a lot of parents, and I'm going to go off a little bit here into the whole wearing a mask thing, because Alistair won't wear a mask.
We tried everything.
And whether you feel that, and I know, guys, man, I know that there's a huge political divide when it comes to masks right now. That's why I didn't want to bring this up. But it ties into what happened at the funeral, because he was getting in other babies' faces, and a lot of parents were giving that look like, could you get your kid away from my kid, like social distance? And Alistair won't wear a mask. He just doesn't. He doesn't like having things on his face. And every time we try to put one on, he just throws it right off.
I just want to see if it fits. You don't want it?
No! Just drop Lucky!
This kid's stubborn. He's still not potty trained, man.
Everything. We're working with him, and he has sensory issues and things like that. We're not anti-mask or anything. It's a law in a lot of places in our state where if you go into a public setting or you go into a restaurant, or Walmart requires them, for example. And currently, I think the governor said kids in K through 12 school have to wear a mask, right?
When they go to school, they're required to wear a mask. And so far, they haven't had any issues with Alistair not wearing one in kindergarten.
Right.
But they're also very careful. They have dividers in their class desks. They wash them religiously. I'm not super worried, but I know that it's a big concern for other parents. So I offer it still when he goes to school, but he just won't wear one. Like,
Right.
The longest he wore one was like 30
I
seconds.
think sorry, I'm
Beating
getting
a
off
dead
in the
horse,
I'm getting
yeah.
off in the weeds here. I'm not saying, I mean, you guys have already made the decision whether you're going to wear a mask or not going to wear a mask. This isn't the video for that. I don't want to open up a huge political thing about it. Just the point is he won't wear one. And he was getting in people's faces.
15 to 20 minutes into the funeral, he was, running around, ringing bells on the trees
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Everything.
Yeah, he's just like all over the place in people's faces. They were getting visibly upset. And then, I'm like, okay, like enough's enough, because he's, like I said, he's crawling under chairs and stuff. So I brought him to the far back of where everyone was sitting. And, sometimes at cemeteries, people will put like windmills, flowers. Sometimes they'll put wind chimes in the trees. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but of course there was wind chimes and there was a bell there too. And so Alistair, like, he saw that and he went to it like a moth to a light. Yeah, he was just like, he had to play with the wind chimes, and he starts ringing this bell. And then we get, you guys know that look where people will turn around and give you that kind of dirty look, like, could you keep your kid quiet, please? And, I was trying to be there. I wanted to be there for Brittany to be supportive, but I just had to get Alistair out of there. So we walked like 100 feet in the back of where everyone was sitting, hoping to calm him down. But he kept like, where they do that thing where they drop and they pull and they're like, no, I want to go back. And he wanted to go see his mom. So I was just like, I got to get him out of here. He's making too much noise. People are looking at us. And as understanding as people try to be, it's also a funeral. He was ruining the eulogy, what's supposed to be a beautiful moment.
There were other babies crying, like my sister's twins, but they took them like far off, so they didn't bother people.
Yeah, and people are generally more understanding of like little babies crying and things like that.
But then our older sons were also acting up.
Yeah, and then so I brought Alistair to the car, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, like our older sons were saying things like, I'm bored, out loud, not like quiet, like, Mommy, I'm bored. It was like, I'm bored. And everyone's kind of looking at like, what? And then one of our kids was like, hey, I want Diet Dr. Pepper. I'm thirsty. And
because we had water and they didn't want water,
no, kids, this
Dr. Pepper,
Yeah, it's fancy. Not a baseball game like peanuts, get your peanuts. It's not like that. And it's really hard. Like we just wanted them to show some compassion. And we talked about this to them prior to going to the event, to the funeral. We tried to prep them as much as we could, like, hey, this is a serious thing. You need to be quiet. You need to be respectful. But yeah, when we got there, we were talking previously. I'm like, this might just be a total failure. I don't know. And it ended up being a failure because I had to get Alistair out of there. He started melting down in the car, having big issues. Eventually, I had to take him to just this abandoned church parking lot just to get him out of the car and walking around just to cool off. And then I get a text from Brittany saying, hey, where are you at? I need you to pick up the older two boys because they're causing problems. And so I brought them back, and then Brittany's stepmom was kind enough to bring them out. We got in the car, and I just got out of Dodge. I'm like, they're not handling this. They're not going to handle the luncheon afterwards. Clearly, they can't handle the most important part. And so, yeah, so what I'm getting at is it's one of those things where as much as we love to support the autism community and those who have autism, and believe me when I say we do love all of you who have autism or are struggling with autism, but in that same vein, we have feelings too, and we feel like we're caught between a rock and a hard place. I was really frustrated, like genuinely. I rarely get angry, like deep down angry, but I was like fuming mad that we're trying to enjoy or at least grieve over her grandfather, and we can't even do that. It's one thing for autism situations to interfere with weddings or family parties or get-togethers where we're supposed to feel joy, but we can't because our kids are having a meltdown or they're having sensory issues or they're just bugging other kids or family members. That's one thing. But when you tell us we can't grieve because of an autistic situation, I mean, that hits you, right? Deep down. Like, no, I'm sorry, you can't grieve. I'm going to go play with some wind chimes and bells, or I'm going to crawl under the seats, or I'm going to get in little babies' faces and make their parents nervous that they're going to get a disease, or, I mean, all kinds of things, right? And So it wasn't just one thing, it was multiple things.
Well, I think what really made me sad and kind of broke my heart was that this is a family affair. Like I was telling my sons, there's no do-overs. This is a funeral.
Yeah, you get one shot at a
And
funeral.
we had family from all over the U.S. visiting and friends, and we had pictures later with all of the grands and great-grandchildren, and I'm never going to be able to get that again, you know? And our sons were, I understand, they're innocent, and they understand why, you know, as Ian said, why do I have to care, you know, even though he did love his great-grandpa. They didn't see them like a whole lot, but he didn't understand why we wanted him to have empathy and to grieve, and we tried to talk to them about it, but I feel like it almost fell on deaf ears. And it's funny though, like there was one moment that was kind of sweet in all of this. My mom sang at the funeral. She sang a song from Man of La Mancha, which is what my grandpa had picked out. And at the very end, Ian clapped. He was the only one clapping, but he was very happily like, wow, good job,
Yeah,
Grandma.
just innocent. He didn't know the rules of, what you can and can't do at a funeral.
And all my siblings were kind of giggling, because they're like, oh, there's Ian, being cute and, spontaneous. But at the same time, like it just kind of proved to me he doesn't understand the social rules quite yet. And that's something you can talk till you're blue about, social rules and nuance and expressions and things. They won't always pick up on it. I have trouble sometimes picking up on nuance.
That's
too,
another thing I want to talk about too. A lot of you are probably wondering like, hey, why didn't you educate others prior to the funeral? First of all, it's really hard to plan a funeral. It was really stressful. It's always stressful.
And it's not about us.
Yeah, and it's not about us. And I know some of you are literal card carrying parents of autistic kids where you have a card that you pass to people saying, my son or daughter has autism. Like, here's where you can find more information, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in the past. I really don't feel comfortable being a card carrying parent. I feel like to me, and everyone, you might have had different success, but I feel like if you pass someone a card saying your kid is autistic, a lot of parents will just be like, really? Like you have a literal card that you're handing me, and like, are you making excuses for your child? I just feel like a lot of people don't quite grasp that. And, it took our families a long time to come to terms with autism. And so to expect strangers or even family, friends, or acquaintances to just get it because you pass them a card or you have some kind of pre-meeting saying like, hey, our kids might act up. But even having said all that, even if we prepped everyone for this, it's still really disrespectful. And it's not the embarrassment thing. Sorry, I got the phone ringing in the background. We'll just let it ring. It's not just that. And I didn't even feel embarrassed. I just felt upset that we couldn't grieve properly and that we were interfering with other people grieving. That to me was the biggest thorn in the side, which is, you can't be a normal human being and grieve for your loved ones because autism gets in the way. Now again, I'm not slamming autism. Obviously, our channel's dedicated for people with autistic issues. It's hard as a caretaker, like really, really hard. Because like you said, you get one chance at a funeral and Brittany's over there crying and I'm dragging my kids away and other people are looking at us.
Well, for me, it was a reminder that our pace of life is different. Like, for instance, I hate to admit it, I've been jealous of my sister. She has twins, like 3-month-old twins and an older boy, but she's still visiting my mom and my grandma, the widow, pretty much every day, managing to kind of balance that. And if I tried that, we'd be, probably very politely asked to leave after an hour because they'd be bouncing all over the place. Grandma's very breakable house. And it's just one more thing, you know what I mean? Like one more thing that I feel like I have to kind of tiptoe around. Like I can't, unless I leave Rob with the kids, which he's been very generous to watch them like a lot lately, I can't really go over and hang out. You know what I mean? And just be with them. And it
just makes everything difficult. And this was like a really acute example of how difficult autism can be in social situations.
Now, you don't realize how much of a hermit you can become. And
that's the thing. When we finally got them back home, like I don't think it was the next day or something, they wanted to play Costume Quest. They're huge Costume Quest fans. So I think they were playing Costume Quest 2. And they were all smiles and giggles, and we were all hugging and
They're in their
smiling
safe
and laughing.
space, obviously.
But yeah, they're in a very safe, quiet environment where they can just be themselves. We're not going to judge them. They can crawl under the seats. They can ring bells. They can do whatever. And we're just going to be like, oh, whatever, that's our kids. But in certain situations, in certain societal situations, you just can't do that. And it was really difficult too, because Ian, he kept saying, he's like, well, Dad, I have autism and stuff like that. And as a parent with someone who has autism, I really struggle with, like, where's the line? Like, when are you using that as an excuse? Because if your kids are self-aware enough, sometimes they'll use that, like, oh, well, sorry, I can't mow the lawn today, Dad, I have autism. And so they'll obviously like using an excuse, but sometimes they genuinely, like, what seems like it comes so naturally to us doesn't come naturally to them, and we judge them for it wrongly sometimes. And so it's really hard to find that balance of, like, hey, are you just pulling my leg? Like, or maybe you were bored and you were just being disingenuine. And then other times I'm like, no, they really don't get it. I was telling Brittany prior to the funeral, I'm like, do you ever feel like Ginny and Forrest Gump, where you just have to tell everyone he doesn't know any better,
He doesn't know any better!
And that's what it feels like sometimes, is we're just like, hey, he doesn't know any better. And that's not to say, I know it's a stereotype saying, autistic kids don't have compassion, because our kids have a lot of compassion. They give us hugs and kisses, and they love little animals and babies, like we mentioned, and they could be incredibly compassionate. It reminds me of a Spock on Star Trek saying, like, sometimes we feel the deepest, we just don't show it so much. And that reminds me of my kids. They're like little Spocks, like, do you have any feeling? And then sometimes you're like, wow, you are just one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. So,
and I also understand that my bond with my grandpa was probably more than what they had with their great grandpa. This last 2 years, he's been really sick, and especially with the beer virus going on.
The beer virus, yeah.
We haven't had a lot of chances to really visit them. And
so they haven't been close to him for like the last 6 months this has been going on.
Not as close as we have been in the past. And so I can understand sort of on a mental level why they wouldn't be, as sad. But at the same time, it was like a slap in the face. Like, you don't care? Ian told me, I don't care. Why should I care? You know what I mean? And
it's a bitter pill to swallow, that's for sure.
Point being, it was a really hard day.
Yeah.
Not on top of grieving, on top of traveling with the kids, on top of everything else. It was just, like I said, I haven't seen Rob angry like that in a long time. And I haven't been that sad.
I want to be clear,
I'm not,
I love my kids. I genuinely love my kids.
No,
I'm not
saying that.
It's not, I know you're not saying that. I'm just saying, for those who don't understand or maybe new to our channel, it's not that I'm angry at autism per se. What I mean to say is, you just feel trapped sometimes, because autism can be so incompatible with society's rules and regulations, just so incompatible. And it's really difficult, because you're like, well, what are you saying? I can't go to my grandpa's funeral? Is that what you're telling me? Or I can't go to a wedding, or I can't do this or that? And again, I know a lot of people are like, well, find a babysitter. We could not find a babysitter. It just wasn't in the cards. So if you deal with the same thing,
special needs.
Yeah, if you deal with the same thing, do all you can to find a babysitter. So you have a much better experience than we did. But yeah, it's just,
and like I said,
one of those things.
They missed out meeting my cousins and their cousins, and they missed out on that because they literally couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle waiting for an hour and a half for the service to close and go to the luncheon where they'd have more free reign to run in the park, Mm-hmm. And that just, like I said, that just about broke my heart. Like, they can't get that time back with family that we hardly ever see from out of state. So yeah, just a really tough weekend. I'm sorry this video is a downer, guys. We had a really fun video prior to this where the kids are swimming and it's all sunshine and giggles. We have fun though.
But we struggle too.
Yeah.
They were talking about that. A lot of people are like, send comments like, oh, you guys are so great. Do you ever struggle with your kids? Of course we do.
I feel like we keep it pretty real on the channel.
Yeah.
So that's funny when I always kind of scratch my head and people are like, oh, you're totally not having trouble at all. I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah. There was a time I really questioned being a father, when this was like early on and I didn't know what autism was, new parent to autism and stuff like that. I really started to question not just like fatherhood, but my faith that tells us that eternal families are the source of the greatest blessings and happiness. And I'm over here seeing my kids screaming and freaking out and having night terrors, and another kid on the way who has autism. And I remember just having like this crisis moment, like, do I really want to be a dad? Do I really want to raise these? And so when you see a parent leave of, someone who has autistic kids, I'm not saying I understand. Well, I do understand it. I don't condone it, but I do understand why they had so much trouble. It is really, really, really hard sometimes to make that work. I'm definitely committed now. I love my kids now more than ever. But there was that moment, and I'm sure if you guys are being honest, you've had moments like that too, where you're like, do I want to raise autistic children? Can I do this?
Heck, I'm sure most parents feel that way at some point.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's...
Well, even with normal kids.
At times, times
neurotypical kids.
5 with, special needs.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, can I do this? Can I make it?
This?
And this was one of those days where I just, you think you have things under control, and you figured out autism, and you got weighted blankets, and you got medication, and you have all your ducks in a row, and then you bring them to some event, and then all of that's just thrown out the window, and it's a catastrophe, and you're just like, oh yeah, harsh reality. Psh,
but
slap across the face.
We've got each other's backs, though. We're a team.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I love you, of course. Yeah.
But that's comforting
sometimes.
Sometimes.
It was hard. It was very, very hard.
I know. It was really, really difficult.
And I just I just wanted to be there for Brittany, but I couldn't be. And that really frustrated me. I'm like, I want to be there for my wife to comfort her. Nope. I had to drive my kid around. I had to take them to the mall to get their wiggles out. They had little bunnies there at the mall, so they were looking at the glass at the bunnies, and that calmed them down a bit. But Anyway, I'll calm down. I'm getting angry just thinking about it. The good news is they did calm down. Ian especially, he's like, he's getting more mature. He's like, Dad, how can I be more compassionate? He's like, I want to care more about great grandpa.
Oh, he said that?
Yeah. He came to me. He's like, I want to care more about great grandpa. I struggle with it sometimes, talking about that compassion thing with autism. And I'm like, dude, I understand it, and I appreciate you coming to me and trying to feel more compassion, for your loved ones. And, we talked a little bit about it. Like, one of the best ways to feel compassion for someone is to serve them. And that was the hard thing with the beer virus. We can't say the name because YouTube will, flag us. But they couldn't be there for their great grandpa, and that was really difficult.
Well, we're a social family. We'll get together at least once or twice a month, if not more, on holiday seasons. I sing with my mom and sisters at Christmas, and every holiday, every Sunday, we're doing something. And so this last year's been really rough. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, he passed of natural causes, if anyone was curious about that. But yeah, he was a wonderful man, loving father, husband. He called everyone on their birthdays.
And would sing to them happy birthday.
Yeah, he would sing to them happy birthday.
And give them a card in the mail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope we don't disparage his name in any way with this video. On the contrary, we loved him very much. And
no. I don't think that's the vibe we're giving off at all. It's more about our kids like, oh, why didn't you listen? Yeah. Couldn't hold it together for 1 hour,
We'll chalk this one up to education, and we'll be much better prepared next time.
Well, we almost didn't bring them. We thought, well, should we really bring them? I asked my mom. She's like, it's up to you, honey. Whatever you think the kids can handle. And now we know the answer. So that would be no.
Anyway, guys, we've talked a lot. We obviously have a lot of feelings to get out. I have a lot of feelings.
A lot of feelings.
But we really appreciate you listening to this. And again, I hope we love all of you who have autism, or those who are caretakers, parents who are dealing with autistic stuff. But yeah, sometimes I think we should be allowed to vent. I really do. Everyone should be allowed to vent, because when caretakers just bottle it up inside, there can be really unhealthy consequences with that. Really sad things that happen to parents who just bottle it up inside. And I don't want to tell you the horror stories, but...
Well, I was actually been thinking about doing like a self-care video for, people on the spectrum and for their caretakers.
Yeah.
I mean, talk to me on Facebook on our page if you think that's a maybe video you'd want to see.
Yeah.
Because
find us on Facebook. We'll leave a link below. Again,
I have a lot of opinions.
Our comments are disabled because of YouTube.
Yeah. So you can talk to us on Facebook though, and chat with everyone else where we used to comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, gone on long enough. We love you guys. Take care. We'll see you in the next video.
Hey, holidays are coming up, the whole big block of the best holidays ever. So that is something to be positive about.
Yeah, hopefully they'll
Right?
let us go outside.
Hopefully
Yeah.
they'll let us go outside.
Thanks, sweetie.